Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast where we view and review every single Palme d'Or winner in random order. We've been away from the Palme d'Ors for a little while because we talked about all the Best Picture nominees, but today we're back with a bang, an explosion, a drop of some bombs to talk about Apocalypse Now, the 1979 Francis Ford Coppola Vietnam War epic. Quite the memorable film, quite the film with some staying power that has remained in the echelon, some of the echelons, a top echelon, a medium echelon, maybe a bottom echelon of films of all time. I'm really excited to talk about this. I'm just saying that people rank this movie all over.
It is in the most important compilation of great films, which is the Letterboxd Top 250. So.
Yes. And it's like 55 on the IMDb top movies.
I thought the most important canon of body of films was the movies we've reviewed.
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's a good point.
The Mulan remake.
There we go.
Yes, that's true.
Exactly. And finally, Francis Ford Coppola will grace that list with another film, actually.
Yes, a director.
Fourth film of his we reviewed.
Yeah, director of Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola, has graced us with quite the movie, which we're going to talk about. But I'll remind you, a dual reminder, if you missed it, Anora won Best Picture. It also won the Palme d'Or. Oh. We made some videos about that. I would recommend you go check them out. Here are our thoughts. We reviewed every single nominee from this year, all 10 of them. And before we went on that break, we had another Vietnam War movie. It was a long time ago. It feels like months because it was. That would be Robert Altman's MASH from a couple years prior. So while it was far away on our memory, you YouTube viewers could just watch these two reviews right back to back and compare and contrast what the Vietnam War's depiction is like across a couple years in the 70s.
Well, point of order, Timo. The MASH is not about the Vietnam War; it's about the Korean.
Yeah, we all know it's about the Vietnam War.
But it's about I guess.
I digress. Let's talk about Apocalypse Now. After Abram, well, I'll just remind you, for the sake of it, MASH, it did get a score, and we did give it a 5.0 to put at spot number 33 out of 37 films on the list. So will Apocalypse Now beat that? I don't know. Remains to be seen.
We'll see.
Abram, do you have a comment for us to listen to? A dispatch from the field.
Oh. This comes from our episode about Anora winning Best Picture and comes from friend of the show, The Cat Indeed, who's back once again and says the following. If I had a nickel for every time the performance I wanted to win Best Actress was someone playing a sex worker in a dramedy, and it looked like they could pull off the win after some early precursors, but SAG made everyone switch to the person with the narrative, only for my fave to win an Oscar night and make me leap out of my seat and cheer, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot. It's weird that it happened twice. The Cat Indeed, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Thank you, nonetheless, the Cat Indeed, for this great response and remark on Best Actress winning.
Yes, and I like this because it's a puzzle for Tanner to now try to work out.
Yeah, now Tanner's got to trivia research.
They specifically said actress, or did they just say
actress
actor?
Playing a sex playing sex worker in a dramedy. Who had precursors but then lost SAG.
Yeah, okay,
then won.
We got the whole puzzle. He can think about this for the next hour while we review a movie.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me go through some more housekeeping here.
Well, Tanner, I hate to do this to you, but you're up next on the housekeeping. What happened?
That's okay. What happens? It's easy to do.
Yes.
Because, I was prepping a little bit for recapping the plot of Apocalypse Now, as we do at the top of all these reviews. And I was like, I can pretty succinctly just cut it down to, we have our main character, Willard. He is a special forces soldier in Vietnam. He was discharged, went home, but decided that, maybe not decided, was drawn back to the war out of some, post-traumatic stress, feeling that he didn't belong at home anymore. So he was drawn back to Vietnam and given the special mission of finding and assassinating is it General Kurtz? Colonel Kurtz, of course. Portrayed by, of course, Marlon Brando, who has gone rogue somewhere in the Cambodian jungle and is sort of amassing an army of his own and carrying out the war on his own terms. And so Willard boards a boat, goes upriver, sees a lot of fucked up shit happening during the war, and eventually does find and kill Colonel Kurtz.
Sees a lot of fucked up shit? does a lot of fucked up shit.
That true.
Thus is the
That's
Vietnam
true
War.
too. Thus is the Vietnam
Thus
War.
it is. Well, who would like to jump off first? I want to hear. I think I want to hear from Tucker. You.
Oh,
What did you think of this film? Your initial
Right.
thoughts on this rewatch? We all watched this film before,
yeah, yeah.
but we're coming
We-
back to it. It's been a
We
couple
are
years.
indeed all film major adjacent people, and we have, of course, come across Apocalypse Now within our lifetimes. And now that we were in our mid-20s and we were reviewing Apocalypse Now, I got a chance to see it again 8 years after I'd seen it for the first time, which honestly might be the longest gap between like first time watching a movie and like second time watching a movie I've ever had. Like, I don't know if I've watched like something I watched when I was like 5 and just watched it again. I don't know. But regardless, I really didn't remember too much about it other than a couple memorable or iconic sequences that have sort of been brought up again and again. And so rewatching it last night, I was very excited to give this movie a shot that was with a more informed and clear mind. I wasn't in high school when I watched the first time I was in high school, and now I've reviewed hundreds of movies and I get to sit down and think about and analyze Apocalypse Now. And this is a Tucker Hazel moment. I don't care for this movie. And I honest to God don't know how I'm really going to keep up in this review, because this is a very in one ear and out the other movie for me. It just really did not impress me, which I know is the silliest thing to say in a review about Apocalypse Now. But for my role as a reviewer, I do feel a draw to express the experience that I had with Apocalypse Now, and not to necessarily demean its artistic or historical value, but to say, when I sat down and watched 2 hours and 27 minutes of the theatrical cut of Apocalypse Now last night, I was much like Willard. I was fighting for my life. Stay awake, stay engaged, not die. But no, I really think it's an okay movie. You know, lots of big sets that are being destroyed, and you know, Marlon Brando, he's hamming it up. But I mean, it felt really repetitive and slow to me. And for me, the biggest sin is I didn't really particularly care about the characters. I mean, this is not a screenplay forward movie, and that's a big downside for me. Where I really wanted to care a lot more about the personal and dramatic stakes of the characters. And Apocalypse Now isn't particularly concerned with that. It's more concerned with the general depressive atmosphere and oppressive atmosphere of the Vietnam War and the situation that the people are put into, rather than, particular psychology of our main character, who's doesn't like. There's a lot of narration, but he doesn't really say much. He doesn't have like too many interactions with other characters. I don't know. I found it very isolating, and for me, very, very boring movie. I was not a particularly big fan, though I think it is okay on like an external level.
Okay.
Mhm,
Abram,
mhm, mhm.
you're up next. What'd you think?
Well, so this is why I'm glad Tucker's on the review, because Tucker has new things to say about Apocalypse Now.
Yes.
I only have things that people have said before, because personally I love this movie. I think that as a sidebar, sort of watching this sort of externalized collapse and failure of American empire is very interesting to revisit now. But I think I think the way that Apocalypse Now grabs me is that it sort of captures this feeling of slipping in and out of consciousness. It's very liminal.
I was doing that last night.
Oh, he was.
Yes,
Oh, he
very
was.
good. He's fighting for his sanity, etc., etc. We got it.
You're sort of the film for me traps you in this inescapable waking nightmare, and obviously dreams and nightmares are sort of a recurrent idea in our characters. It's one of the first things we learned about Colonel Kurtz is his nightmare of the snail on the edge of a knife. And I feel like that sort of sets us up for the meta experience of watching this film. I think that the score and editing choices are so arresting that when you put them on top of what I personally view as a series of vignettes that demonstrate different ways in which the American military and American empire failed, creates this very compelling and like sleepless viewing experience. I think it's hard for me to not be transfixed by the film. And I think that the visceral weight of it makes its critique and commentary on post-traumatic stress disorder and the American military, which are certainly not new. either for its time and doubtlessly in the canon of war films since, they're not new ideas, but I think the presentation of them and the feel of the movie to me is what makes it so special and makes it so memorable for me. It was buried in my mind as I was watching. I felt it all coming back, even though I've not seen it since I think I was a freshman in college when I watched it for intro to global cinema, world cinema, or something.
Sure.
It was some class. So I loved it.
I'm gonna hop in. Because I'm
Go for it.
chomping at the bit. I've had an energy drink before this recording, so I'm
Oh boy,
all ready
here
to
we
go.
He's wide awake.
Wired. I love this movie. I've loved this movie for as long as I can remember having seen it. I find it endlessly fascinating. It's the most fascinating film that exists production-wise. I don't think
Well, yes.
I don't think you can have a more storied, unique, and troubled production than this one. And so being like as having been on many troubled and unique productions myself, it's fun to hear about ones that are like way worse than anything that I've been on.
The worst it could ever go on any film set ever.
And so, boom, metatextually,
It's set
I'm
a bar
in.
that I hope is never surpassed.
Yes.
Yeah, well.
But this time around watching it, I am a lot more educated on Vietnam, on our America's presence there, the things that led to the war, the socio-political reality of Vietnam. I'm in my analytical political mind these days a lot. And so this film, I think, provided me last night with a ton of substance and poetic musings on how military intervention looks and the hypocrisy of America and the coding of horrible deeds in nice words and this like bureaucratic killing machine that is the military, and Willard as this very central cog in the whole thing and the role that he plays. I think the sound design, the cinematography, the special effects, the editing, and the acting are all just wonderful, out of this world, really, really good. I'm gonna lay it out here that like I think Walter Murch is a freaking genius, and the combination of sight and sound, the picture editing and the sound editing that he did on this, like at the same time, and I'll get into this in detail when the time is right, but it's just phenomenal, and it's groundbreaking technically. There's a bunch of new standards developed from it, but the viewing experience of a movie like this is so multi-sensory because you have just a wonderful concoction of sight and sound that, I mean, I think real few productions and films like get to this level of like intermingling between all what we see and what we hear, and that is just truly delightful for me. I absolutely love it. So yeah, this is a definitely favorite film of mine out of all the movies I've ever seen, and so yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. I'll be pretty brief because I'll just be sort of regurgitating things that Abram and Timo have already said. But what I will say is that, you know, many people call it's a miracle that this film exists, or it's a miracle that any film exists. But that is perhaps nowhere more true than Apocalypse Now. As Timo already alluded to, the production history of this, I was drawn to on this rewatch for myself to also pair it with Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's Apocalypse, the sort of making of / retrospective documentary on Apocalypse Now. Both using
and you watched that? Is what you're saying?
I did. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I was going to, but I didn't have time today.
It's an amalgamation of 70s stuff that was taken on set at the time by Eleanor Coppola, and then 1990s sort of retrospectives from Francis Ford Coppola, Eleanor Coppola, Martin Sheen, etc., about the production of the film and how it sort of in hindsight how it feels. But no, obviously the film itself is I'm glad that both Abram and Timo already brought up the themes surrounding like militarism and colonialism, because that's a really fascinating reading that I got out of it this time. But it's worth noting that the more basic, straightforward read of the film about like descent into madness and dehumanization, that is also key to America's behavior in all wars, but most especially to this film, the Vietnam War, is important, is an accurate reading of the film, and is sort of layered throughout. But it sounds like we'll have a lot of things to say about basically every sequence of this film. So shall we dive in, gentlemen?
Yes.
Tucker, where should we start?
Yeah, we're going to have a new little segment here in which Tucker, our resident expert critic, gives us a topic area to begin.
What makes me the resident expert critic of the four of us?
We're all
How
the
did I
resident
get-
movie
expert
reviews
critic.
published than the rest of us.
Yeah.
That's true.
that is true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
10,000 hours, etc.,
not-
etc.
yeah. Oh man, I wonder if that's true. Nah.
Calculate that.
No, wait,
What-
no way. 10,000. No.
Yeah,
Jesus.
no, yeah.
What
no way.
topic area should we begin this discussion with after our initial thoughts here?
How about memorable sequences?
Okay.
Okay.
Or like, moments of character interaction or action or things that really stuck out to you while watching this movie. Because to me, there are a couple. The first one that really caught my eye and drew me into the thing that I took away most from this movie, which is the fact that a lot of the people involved in the Vietnam War portrayed in this movie, the characters portrayed in this movie, are kind of like the sloppy version of the American military. Like they're regimented at times, but people hop over the command and like ignore orders constantly. They kind of obviously there's a lot of mistreatment of the locals and things. And one of these moments that felt like incredibly unprofessional or unmilitaristic in my mind was this moment when I don't know which rank the guy is, but the guy with the sunglasses that's commanding all the
Oh, Robert
helicopters.
Duvall.
Yeah, Robert Robert Duvall's character.
Kilgore. That's his
Yeah,
name.
Kilgore. Yeah. He has a deck of cards, and he's like dropping cards on the corpses of these local Vietnamese people that have been killed in the attacks that seem like they were just doing this just to knock out a wave of people. And him going around and very carelessly and thoughtlessly dropping cards on people's corpses. I will then defer to you guys if you want to respond to this, like why he was doing that. I wasn't really able to put that together. But I found that the imagery of this guy who's supposed to be in charge, supposed to be taking things seriously, just kind of, doing whatever. And then he gets easily distracted when he hears that there's like a surfer guy. Like that to me was a moment of really strong imagery and characterization that to fold this a little bit into some of the criticisms I have of this movie, I didn't feel I got out of most of the character moments in this movie, but Robert Duvall, Kilgore, that specific moment was something that really hooked me and like made me sit up like, oh, I haven't seen something like this in a war movie before. And seeing him just be totally flippant about this insane scenario that he's in, of which he's supposed to be the guy who is leading the charge, was a really harrowing moment. That was one of the moments that really tied me into what I think the themes of this movie is going for.
Yeah.
Stronger than some of the other sequences.
I'll jump in and just be like, Kilgore as a character is maybe one of my favorite characters in all of movies because of this real mix you have. He, in that moment you're talking about, as he's handing out the cards, he explains why he's doing it, and it's so that Charlie knows who did this, he says. Because someone flips over the card and it's got the logo.
Oh, sure. It's like it's literally a calling card.
It's
but
literally
not
a calling card.
Here's the thing that I didn't know, and I don't know if there is a reason for this, like why he was choosing which cards to put down, or like if they meant anything.
He was just pulling.
Maybe I was trying to read into that a little.
Yeah,
bit.
he was just pulling from the top of the deck and then like four spades.
Like, this guy looks like a two of diamonds or whatever. Yeah.
And it's a moment that is echoed throughout the film because you have these two colonels, right? You got Kilgore and you have Kurtz. And you have Kilgore, who is a decorated, a leader, loved by his men, good at doing military stuff, aka killing and murdering and capturing. And then you have Kurtz, who is all the same, but just really reviled by the higher ups, the brass, the Harrison Ford of this film at the beginning. For let's just put it like, no difference between these people in their actions. Their spoken ideology is displayed to be a little bit different. Kilgore, after he's laying out those cards, comes across or is brought over to a dying Vietnamese man who's like holding his intestines in with the pot lid. And the soldiers were gonna get him some crappy water, and he was like, no, any man who's brave enough to fight deserves water from my canteen. And now he's distracted as a result of the surfer. But this spoken ideology of honoring the warrior, and the warrior as an honorable profession or an honorable action, I think pervades the film, but not in a positive way, as a thing that characters say, but that they almost always disavow in their actions. Because Kilgore leaves the man to die and then attacks the heavily controlled village for the prospect of surfing there. Not for any actual military gain, but because he wants to go have fun. And so that leads us to maybe my favorite sequence of all time, which is the Ride of the Valkyries flying into and attacking the village.
One of my favorite sequences being, of course, just one of the most famous film sequences of all time. But, I digress.
The sound design of that sequence is so good, and I love it so much, and it's so loud that I use it to test if my speakers are performing up to my expectations.
Sure.
There's a line shortly after their aerial assault on the Vietnamese village where, or it might have been before, but Kilgore says to the other guys when they're sort of protesting if they ought to be pushing into Vietnamese territory in this way, he says, "Charlie, don't surf."
Yeah.
And I think to me that's like one of the most intriguing lines in the whole film, because Tucker, you're using this word or this phrase I really liked of supposed to. These military men, they're supposed to be this archetype, right? And what we see here is we see instead a disorganization, and we see there's this idea about Vietnam, and you can sort of extrapolate it to American conquest more generally of it as a sort of stand-in for the for westward expansion. After there was no more land to conquer to the west, you can conquer land here in Vietnam. It as this sort of fantasy in some ways for a character like Kilgore, who's here to fight, of course. And we know that he's been here for a while because he doesn't flinch as they're being shelled.
Incredible stuff from Duvall. When there's just mortars going off behind him, everyone else in the shot is like flinching out on the. He's just like a statue in those scenes.
We know that to me that says he's been here for a while, but I think we know a couple other things about him. We know that he has this sort of sense of American exceptionalism in him. He's not going to get hit. He doesn't have to flinch. He's
There's a
here
weird
to
light around him.
Yeah,
he has main character energy.
Plot armor.
He does.
He's here to surf, and Charlie don't surf. And I think that the time we spend illustrating both incompetence and indifference to the conflict is extremely interesting. And it's, I think, really exceptionally satirical when we are looking at a chopper and the chopper is loaded with weaponry, and then we look at another chopper and it's loaded with surfboards.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great visual image of what Vietnam was for a lot of people. It was this frontier where you could go and you could screw around. And Vietnam, and I think that Apocalypse Now captures many different things that Vietnam was for many different types of Americans who were conscripted, who volunteered, who returned. The film demonstrates the excess and the inhumanity of American imperialism extremely well, and the incompetence, indifference, and sense of entitlement of the American soldiers. I think that whole sequence is the best in the film, in my view.
I mean, it really is like a perfect encapsulation of sort of a one thing that the film is going for, which is like it's something that Kurtz brings up as well, that like he sees he sort of juxtaposes the treatment of locals between both the Americans there, even as they're doing inoculations as in this final sequence that he has, versus like the VC, the North Vietnamese army, and how most notably the Americans try to bring America to Vietnam with them. They're trying to recapture these creature comforts. They're bringing their surfboards. They are bringing their music. They're bringing their meat, their beer, their etc.
Their religion.
Their women. They're bringing everything. They're trying to make war comfortable. And it sort of flies in the face of everything that Kurtz believes about combat, believes that a combatant, a soldier should be. And that's why, Kurtz and Kilgore are sort of like perfect mirror images of one another. And Robert Duvall has this line in that last sequence, after he does some of the most famous movie quotes of all time, like "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" and so on and so forth. He's like, someday this war is going to end. And he just kind of leaves it there. But then you watch Duvall's face, and it goes through like a Rolodex of emotions about that. There's like sorrow, but also hope in his face after he says that like, I want to go home, but like there is a level of freedom here. But we're trying to retrofit a hellish environment that we're creating. That's just not going to work. It's a quick Band-Aid over the atrocities that we're doing to keep our minds off of it. But as Willard says, the more they try to make it like home, the more they just miss home.
Mm-hmm.
But they can never go back there because they've been, forever changed by the things going on here.
The things that they've done and that they've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that attack on the village scene is so, I think, politically charged also because Coppola takes great efforts to show in this scene, I think, some of the only real images of Vietnamese people, Vietnamese life, and the like resistance and the opposition to the American occupiers. And so, we see that this is both. They say this is a stronghold. They say it's hot. It's hard to take this town. And eventually, I think we learn why, because there's like a school there and children there, of which the Americans exploit as a military target. And they just lay waste to this town that is these people. And after the grenade goes off in the evac helicopter that a woman throws in, they just murder everybody there. This is obviously a reference to the My Lai. No, it's not said like that, but it's said similar.
My Lai, I think, is
My Lai. This massacre that happened, total war crime, total horrible stuff that the American military did. And it's in this scene that I think we pit this like the awesomeness and the bravado and the inability to make an anti-war picture. I think that this movie is not anti-war because these scenes are so compelling and like raw and just like they fill you with like a jingoistic rage basically. And yet you also watch the inhumanity coming from that very emotion. And so that permeates through the rest of the film, but I think it's really on display in the attack on the beach scene.
Yes. I was trying to think. I'll see if I have any notes from this sequence of things that I wanted to bring up. Abram, you brought up the they're bringing their religion thing in. I love the church service thing with like people be like a tank flamethrower in the back of it, which is like the most over the top, braggadocious like form of violence and military technology that you could think of. It's just a tank spitting flames onto a wood hut or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, there's a lot of things like that.
I mean, to that point, if we're just thinking about just the I think what you're getting at, Timo, and Tanner, you as well, is this awe in the imagery. I think about the planes bringing the napalm to the tree line, and I think what makes this film particularly interesting and makes that note that Duvall has about someday the war is going to end so interesting is that the film displays the technical prowess and mechanical advantage of the U.S. military, but you're watching this with the knowledge that it was a war that the U.S. could not win, as much as it felt like it wanted to, and as much as it tried, it couldn't. And so I think that that's another layered element of these scenes. This rage, this willingness to destroy the education, the family, to no end, to the end of being able to surf. When you look at that scene in the larger context, there was nothing gained of any real material value
No.
here, other than the ability to get the boat a little bit further up the river. I think that the film is very interested in futility. And I think that the futility of what America did in Vietnam and the horror that came from that futility is illustrated across the entire film. I think also about the boat stop when they are
Yes.
checking a passing Vietnamese boat to see if they're smuggling any kind of weaponry, and they're not. But we have Lawrence Fishburne's character, who is very young. I think we learn he's 17.
He's
So,
17
Apparently,
in
yeah.
the movie, but in real life he's 14.
14. Lawrence
Interesting,
Fishburne lied about his age to go, go make this movie
And
in
He's
fucking
also
the Philippines.
unrecognizably young. Like
Yeah.
we know what Lawrence Fishburne's face looks like. Not that guy. Like his mouth looks similar still, but like
Uh-huh.
that he aged into a different guy. He Pokemon evolved.
Let me
into a
tell you,
different character.
watching Hearts of Darkness and then them showing footage of 14-year-old Lawrence Fishburne, and then fast forwarding to interview footage of, let's see, how old would he be? He'd be like
Mid-30s, early 40s.
like he's like 35 or whatever. You're like, Jesus Christ, no, that's Lawrence Fishburne. It's also like early 90s Lawrence Fishburne, so is the coolest guy who ever lived. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear what you guys take away from that scene, but illustrating this other dimension, because if we think of Kilgore as a person who shouldn't be there,
yeah,
however you want to take that idea, I think we can also look at Mr. Clean, they call him,
yeah.
as
The-
another
the
person.
guys on the boat are Clean, Lance, Willard, obviously, Chief,
Chef.
and then Chef.
Yeah. What do you make of this scene?
I think that this scene, the note that we begin this scene on is Willard telling Chief, "Don't do this. Don't stop. Don't this is not worth our time." And Chief is like, "No, we got to do this. We stop. We do this all the time. It's routine." And I think that kind of, we talk about like banality of evil on some of the World War II films that we discussed, but like this insistence on following routine, even when this greater goal, still relating to killing, kind of is over top of us. The scaredness that then our young men show in the scene, Chef, previously having been scared by the tiger and vowing to never get off the boat again, is forced to get off the boat and go look through the stuff, and so he's angry, and then our tension is really heightened, and they gun them all down, they just kill them all, and we have that amazing shot of Lawrence Fishburne. He's wearing the sunglasses. Might or might not be tripping. That in this later part of the movie, the young guys,
They're all like seemingly on
like-
drugs of some
like
sort.
drugged
Some of the
out.
actors actually were on drugs, especially at this point in the production too.
and he pulls his glasses down. He looks in horror at what he's just done, and he puts them back. And I think that is another kind of moment of where our human side, our human reaction is shown, and that this is a terrible thing, and the self-awareness of it. But then the mask, the sunglasses, the like impartiality, and the I was just following orders falls right back over us, and we move on, not having killed 5 people and not having many consequences. Just do it and move on.
That symbol of the aviators is also like an indelibly like American masculine like form of fashion too.
And
And it's
everything
being worn by a kid like a 17-year-old in the movie who, as we learn, has never really been out of Brooklyn or whatever, and is sort of losing his mind at the like land and the scope and the space of Vietnam.
I think it's incredibly important to remember our briefing scene. The briefing scene, while not like flashy or actually, I think, super entertaining, it is extremely dense and laden with ideas and things that we should be keeping in the back of our mind for the rest of the film. And they, in that scene, describe Kurtz's methods, and they ascribe to him having gone completely insane for the things that he's choosing to do to achieve his ends of controlling the population and fighting back. And his ends are not really well described in the film. But we can compare what Kurtz is alleged to have done with what we actually see the American soldiers do. And I think that key comparison paints an extraordinarily negative picture of America and of the military apparatus, in that it does the same things. It kills people, innocents, for whatever reason, for no reason, just because they wanted to, or because they perceived a threat. That opening idea of terminate with extreme prejudice. This is like a oft repeated and very famous line, but like that, to do that to our own, while then we're also going out and doing much worse to the indigenous, to the native Vietnamese population, is a huge condemnation of our own ideology, of our own proclaimed methods, that they really aren't any better at all, and that there is no moral value to anything that America was doing in this war.
Tucker, is there, because you got us started on the Kilgore sequence? Are there any other memorable scenes that crossed the threshold for you, and that like really that connected with you on some level?
Well, I think that the sequence where they attack the boat of people with all the food, like they're just fishing or whatever. The one thing I think is really interesting about that sequence is how it also again plays into the same thing I was talking about earlier of most people involved, most of the American soldiers involved in this war aren't really taking the war seriously, and certainly don't seem to really understand the weight of the actions that they're doing. I think nowhere is that better portrayed in the movie than when Lawrence Fishburne just decides to open fire for, he's just kind of twitchy, and he does it for like a minute and a half. It's like so overkill. But another thing I think is interesting in that sequence and the one surrounding it is the character Chief, I believe, the guy who's piloting the boat. He is the one character in the movie that I think subverts this, because he is, for most of the movie, trying to like give commands to the younger soldiers on the boat. And he's like, okay, we're doing the protocol when he brought that up earlier. Even when Willard's like saying, no, we just need to keep going. He's very much about following the rules that have been set forth by the military, mostly seeming to avoid those kind of situations. And obviously Chief is not happy about what happens. But then what also I find interesting about the interplay between the wider group of people on the boat and Chief is that they seem to respect him enough, but they don't seem to listen to anything he says. And then he doesn't really seem to push back that hard. Like all this stuff goes down, and then they just they take the puppy and they just move on. And I find that interplay of who's in charge and when they follow the orders and when things are like when there's punishments, which of course is not particularly often, to be very interesting. And that was just another sequence that again tied into that element that I felt was very strong of the people involved in this, American soldiers, not taking this situation seriously.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up, because it highlights a really interesting juxtaposition. One of the things we learn about Kurtz that's reaffirmed to us through the dossiers that Willard is getting and reading and diving into is that he is a decorated traditional military man. He's been to West Point. He's third generation at West Point. He is a rank and file asset to the American military. So that's our target. But then let's think about who's on the boat. As you're saying, Tucker, we have this man, Chief, who has this at least some kind of reverence for or experience with the Navy, and yet the members
he's much
of
older.
He's much older, and then the members of his crew are a surfer, a high school kid, and an aspiring chef.
Yeah. We are missing out one character, a true G-man through and through, Colonel Willard.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, it's interesting, Willard being on the boat, and to my point earlier, though I do like the narration that pervades most of the movie, Willard is not really involved in the group. He is usually by himself. He's usually kind of in a corner, like looking. He's like an onlooker, but he's not particularly involved. I think the reason we didn't bring him up is because he does feel very detached and separate from this group of characters, and obviously that's intentional and shows the way that he is, focused on his mission and doesn't share the same sort of ideals and personality as those people around him. But I didn't even think to bring him up because I'm like, well, he's kind of he's his own party.
He
But he
doesn't
is
necessarily have, any bonding moments outside of Chef, I would say, which is a screenwriting thing because of course Chef is kind of the one. Oh, I guess Lance as well. Maybe the only one that I don't remember a specific sequence with are is Clean. Does he have a sequence where he like talks to
he
Clean
doesn't he
specifically?
doesn't really have a sequence, but we do learn about Clean because Clean doesn't receive letters. He gets tapes from
Yes,
his
that's right.
mother. And so we are exposed to some of his backstory. Just
Yeah, like
he's
over when he's over his dead body, literally.
yeah, like literally over the dead body. But if we don't have more, I think it's a appropriate time to talk about Willard because
Sure.
he is our central perspective of the film. He's the madman who we open on with this crazed dreamlike sequence.
Yes.
Saigon, shit. Like the way that this movie opens and puts us in Willard's mind space is such a unique thing, and his mind space itself is shown to be a very troubled and a
Well,
very like well, it's hard to explain, but it just captures Vietnam and the melees and the confusion and the trauma all together into one man's mind that we are exposed to, and then we go off on this adventure, quote unquote,
mhm.
afterwards. The perspective of Willard, I think, is really really important in the film. Given his background, he is special forces, like you said. He went to involved with the CIA. He's
Yes.
covert ops, does a lot of secret shit. He says he's killed 6 or so men, probably, but he guesses it's more.
Mhm.
And this is a very different character than the other military men that were shown in the film. Like his
Are you talking about like Harrison Ford and that crop? Is
Mhm.
that who you're talking about? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Different than that crop, but also different than Kilgore and his
Sure.
crop. Um, to me, he becomes most aligned with Kurtz at the end. He
Well, of
basically,
course.
at, as his progression goes from disillusioned and a fugue state to disillusioned and aligned with the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, we are introduced to him, of course, in the midst of a mental breakdown. And like, you have to be
For the
it must be
character and the actor.
Well, yes, in Hearts of Darkness documentary, Martin Sheen talks about he actually was drunk during that filming of that first sequence and broke the mirror on accident, and that's really his blood that's being rubbed all over his body and bleeding all over the bed and everything. Like that's just they just had the cameras rolling for Martin Sheen doing all of this, and it's just Francis Ford Coppola like shouting at him like his character's headspace and seeing Martin Sheen like probably a bottle of vodka deep spinning out in real time, which is
Hmm.
fascinating and like an outpouring of like an actual guy going through it. Which is why I think that moment's especially so evocative when we're doing the uh what's the word I'm looking for, when they're superimposing
Lots of
ceiling
superimposing, yeah.
fans and helicopters and
Hmm.
everything. He is still in Saigon. He's addicted to war. He's on the verge of madness and now must traverse into the jungle, delving in a search for himself, looking for a guy who is like the rational or the eventual outcome of this mental breakdown, who is Colonel Kurtz. And he is sort of through these dossiers, through these messages, through learning about Kurtz, being like ingratiated towards him, towards his way of thinking, seeing the ways that the American war machine is breaking down and being unsuccessful, and softening or obfuscating its combat or its atrocities. And he eventually meets Kurtz, of course, and has to be indoctrinated further. He is taken prisoner, as we know, but Kurtz has plans for him. So yeah, I mean, using him as the vector through which the audience experiences the film is very good. It's good screenwriting from the point of this being a descent into madness as a film.
Hmm. Hmm.
I will say one of my very subjective criticisms of this movie that there's not really any way to explain away or rationalize it in any way is that I find the voice and performance of of Willard to be really like corny.
Mm.
I think that the so gravelly voice, like to me, it's like Duke Nukem. Like it's a parody. It's like Grim Fandango. It's like the sort of like when people are making fun of like a noir voiceover, which is to me very much what the voiceover is like I was a private detective and the night was long and dark and the rain was kind of like it has this sort of like so like overly evocative and gritty to where I have a very difficult time taking it seriously. And I think that's a big reason why I find it hard to be bought into the reality of Apocalypse Now is I never feel that Willard is a person. I never feel his emotional struggle. I understand.
I don't think he's a person either. I think
Well,
continue,
sure. I mean,
but
for
yes.
me, that's a very big issue for me in becoming emotionally or even personally involved in the narrative being told to me. I feel very detached from this person, and I find it very difficult to relate to his mental state, even though I understand it because like, oh, you know, he's going crazy and everything's, you know, he's very isolated and stuff. I'm like, to me, I get it, but I don't. It doesn't feel real to me. It doesn't feel believable because his performance is leading into an, in my eyes, overly dramatic tinge that feels fake and almost parodic to me.
I
just
think
disagree wholeheartedly, but yes, Abram, continue.
Yeah, my view is that the film's not interested in cultivating a sense of realism.
No, it's not realistic at all.
I think the film is a lot more interested in this sort of sense of surrealism, if anything. To me,
sure.
I think the reason the voiceover is so effective, and the reason that Willard is such an effective vector into the narrative, is that we do feel distanced from him. I think what's interesting is that we return to this where you might see a sort of over drama. I see a very clipped, a very clear of mind voice. We go from these moments of great chaos and atrocity back into the mind of this man who is researching an enemy very carefully. He's stalking this prey in his mind. And I think that this sort of discordant voice against the chaos that we see unfold in conjunction with this synthetic score that doesn't feel like it belongs puts me in this strange position. And I think that, to me, Apocalypse Now would be a much less successful film if I didn't feel so goddamn odd while watching it. And I think that the oddity comes from how inscrutable Willard can be, and how he exists in proximity to, opposed to in step with, the man on the boat, in terms of it, both in the way he feels like he inhabits a different physical space, but also very clearly a different mental space. I think that it's to me critical to how the film operates that he has this demeanor.
And I think it's very important stylistically to hearken back to the noir themes, both visually and screenplay wise, with the narration. You know, we shoot every night scene like it's a noir movie. We like very intentionally are photographing things in a surrealistic way, adding colored smoke. There's a Vittorio Storaro, the cinematographer, has a very detailed color theory to this movie with dream and reality, and you have your yellows and your blues and your greens, and they all. This is written, and he's talked after the movie came out in interviews and stuff about how this was like influencing his decision making for the cinematography to create a very surrealist and like hard to pin down as real place through the imagery. And then Murch is also helping in the sound design with expanding our world and pulling us using elements like in the tiger scene, for example. Murch, I was reading an interview he did with Salon from like 2000 before Redux came out, about how that scene uses at a certain point the soundscape and the imagery just are completely separate. They just don't relate to each other at all, and yet we don't notice because our subconscious understanding of sound is like allowing us to fill in all these gaps. And right before the tiger attacks, we hear this thumping, 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 and it's our logic brain can fill in that it's artillery from a valley over, the the echoes of the war, but our real emotional, like right in the moment brain is pulling out this heartbeat, this like pounding subconscious feeling, and then the tiger attacks and we're in this like intense loud moment. This sound design does a lot of work to kind of blend the realm of like war and jungle and insanity through a lot of very specific elements. The helicopter blades, both real helicopter blades, synthesized helicopter blades. Sometimes we hear them, up close and playing with all the different types of helicopter in the way that we can hear if it's the turbine or the blades going. I mean, Murch goes on and on and on into extreme detail about his thinking for the sound here, but it's all in service of this like atmosphere that the film is, I think, excellent at creating. That I might even argue few other films come close to creating an atmosphere of this magnitude and like level of impression on the audience.
Um, Timo, I want to spin off of what you were just talking about building the atmosphere, because obviously the final sequence, Kurtz's sort of temple is all about the atmosphere. But before we get there, we get to my personal favorite sequence of the entire film, which is the bridge.
Dolong Bridge.
Dolong Bridge is a sequence that, yes, I watched this back when I was in high school. This sequence, and specifically the character of, I didn't remember his name until I rewatched the film, but the character of Roach stuck with me so much. I mean, that is like A plus S tier, like atmosphere setting and set piece creation.
Oh my god, this scene is incredible.
Where they come upon it. Well, we maybe can also talk about the Playboy sequence that happens before this, but like this sequence is just like branded into my brain, where like they come upon it and there's this bridge suspended over the river that is, as we learn, constantly being bombed and simultaneously rebuilt just to like check quotas and for the army to be able to say, hey, road's open, bridge is there, all good, thumbs up, no crisis. And it's just it is just a constant battle zone of two people on the opposite sides, the North Vietnamese and the American soldiers, who are just becoming so ingratiated in the constant fighting that they are completely dehumanized. They are completely at odds. All they know is fighting. They just know to kill the people across the river from one another. As they say when they get out of the sequence, there is no commanding officer. There is no chain of command. There is no like orders being given. There is only kill the people over there. And so what you craft in this sequence is people who are adept at doing that. Of course, when you get there, you had all the people wading into the water with suitcases. What's in this suitcases? I like to imagine that there's absolutely nothing in them. That they just know that as a symbol of us getting out of there. If I have this, maybe I can get out somehow. I don't have anything with me though. And then you have Willard and Lance going through these trenches. That is all they're like these carnival or fairy lights suspended above the whole thing, where
with rockets and flares and
exactly
pyrotechnics going off.
When they come upon it, there's also almost like circus like music to it. I don't know if it's score or supposed to be like a mix of the radios that are on the ground there. But of course, like they're wandering through the trenches, they come across, groups of soldiers. They're listening to Jimi Hendrix. It's this very psychedelic feeling. It's cutting to the heart of Vietnam being like the psychedelic era war. And then it culminates in their meeting of Roach, who is this guy who's just sort of like off in a corner napping as his friends 20 feet away are just blasting away at some Vietnamese soldier on the other side of the river. And they're like, oh, Roach, you bring him in, tap him in to come kill this guy. And Roach, he shuts off the music, he loads up his grenade launcher, he listens, he finds him, he locates him like echolocation style, blasts off a grenade from his grenade launcher, and just goes back. And they ask him do you know who's in charge here? He's like, yes, I do. And that's when we hard cut back to there's no commanding officer here. There's nobody.
Yeah.
And then you ride away, and the bridge is because there's always the constant like sparks from like welding happening, like while all this fighting is happening, there's just some guy up there like welding this bridge together, seemingly. Incredible. I love this sequence so much. Like I said, so memorable for me between over almost a decade of not watching this film.
Yeah, and I think in Redux, it's not in this version, but when Roach says, yes. I think they actually cut out because I think the next line that he says is "It's you." He says to Willard that Willard is the commanding officer because he's the highest ranking dude there. And
I
then
thought
that's
well earlier there's a moment where I think one of the other soldiers says, "I thought it was you."
I thought it was
Like
you. Yeah.
Roach doesn't say it, but another soldier says it. In that
Yeah.
sequence.
Yeah.
There's also just something very, again, it goes back to this notion of surrealism. How did he echolocate the target?
Like I
And
said, I think it's the sequence that you understand that like it's just the constant fighting. These are the last guys that we see also before we see Kurtz and his group. So like you kind of have this feeling that like they are the last bastion of like they are the very front of the war, the very edge of it. They are the people being crafted into completely dehumanized killing machines.
Well, what's interesting is that in that scene, and obviously also in Kurtz's temple, we come to see these cultures that that understand their culture, but it's impenetrable from the outside. We come onto this bridge and we understand that there's a history here, a routine here. There are people here who have not just arrived; they have lived at this bridge or at this temple. And this is, I think, another reason why Willard's disposition is key, because he's bemused. I think he doesn't understand the culture around that bridge or at the temple, but in an abstracted sense, he does. And I think he exists in this strange space of being able to not be a tourist in these places. And I think that actually, for me, what's unsaid by Willard's ability to navigate these places as though he'd walked in them before is part of what makes him a very interesting character to me. I actually think that if we had more about Willard, he would, for me, do less to propel us deeper into this journey into hell.
His this is not a word, enigmosity, his just hard to like.
It's a word now, baby.
It's a word now. The ways that in the Playboy sequence, because I think that it's an interesting sequence. It's kind of cool, but it does kind of hark on some of the similar themes that we've been talking about, bringing the home front here to the war. But right before the concert, when Willard goes and is trying to get supplies for the boat with the logistics officer or whatever, and that scene demonstrates to us how comfortable Willard is within the military hierarchy, how he knows exactly the right words to say and motions to do, throttling the guy to get what he wants, and how he knows how to use his like classified status, his secret mission status, to not tell anybody anything, which works for his character, but works in the moment. He yanks the guy out. He's like, you. Oh, cripe. Well,
you knock your mic away.
Knocked my mic away. I'll fix this in a moment. But he just gets what he wants through brute physical force against one of his compatriots, and then that brings us into the Playboy Bunny performance. But I think it's that moment right before that has a really juicy character moment for Willard, and it's not in his dialogue; it's in how he talks. It's in how he acts.
It raises something that actually I'm curious to get Tucker's view on, because to me it's an interesting dimension of the film. I think we see it in this scene, but we also see it in the briefing scene that you cited earlier, Timo. The language of information and hierarchy in this movie is very interesting. There's a line from Kurtz at the end of the film where he's sort of reading or working on some sort of manifesto about how we can drop bombs, but we can't put the word fuck on our planes.
Yes.
And we're not sent in to kill Kurtz. We're sent in to terminate his leadership with extreme prejudice. I'm curious what you guys make of it, and this use of language in the film, and the way that we talk about the operation, and the way that we talk about Kurtz, and the way that Kurtz then talks about the other military men. I'm curious what you guys think about this stuff.
I love the monologue. I'll let somebody else take it further, but I love the monologue so much I had to go look it up again. I have it pulled up right here, and I will reference it in a moment.
It's dialectic, man. It's you can't fly into space on fractions, man. Where are you gonna land? 2/3, 1/8 flying to Venus, man. What are you gonna do?
Hell yeah, Dennis
Yeah.
Hopper.
I have totally forgot that Dennis Hopper was in it, and when I saw him show up, and he's got like 12 cameras dangled around his neck, and he's
It
like,
is Dennis
"Hey,
Hopper.
I'm
Holy shit.
American. Hey, I'm American,
I
buddy."
thought I could. I recognized him. Like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that makes sense in
Yeah.
retrospect.
He's perfect for like the utterly burned out, like American guy who is there to find the truth after all. But Abram, your question was more directly about Kurtz and like his in these sequences where he's sort of reciting his broken manifesto in a way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just mostly interested in the different ways people talk about war in the language we use. The language of these men who are high up in the ranks and are on their second special ops mission to kill Kurtz, no, sorry, again, to terminate with extreme
Yeah.
prejudice Kurtz. That versus the way Kurtz speaks versus the way that Dennis Hopper's character of the journalist speaks. We have so many different languages in the film, just in those groups, not even to mention a lot of the other soldiers we meet.
Well, yes.
I mean, for me, I just think, and I feel like I'm answering my own question, but I think
Go
that
right ahead.
part of what, again, makes this film so interesting to me is the way that this military language, this very organized language, really has no use when we make it into the field. And what Kurtz is rebelling against in some ways is that language. Obviously, there's a deeper ideological difference he has, but he's studying dialectics. He's reading poetry out loud. He is talking about the language of war as much as he's talking about the art of war. And I think that that's an interesting lens into, again, the difference between what America says it does and what it does do on the battlefield. And obviously there's the infinitely cited George Carlin bit about the changing language from shell shock to PTSD. And the way that we, through language, are dehumanizing. I think that that's a very important and subtle through line across the movie.
To return to this monologue for a moment, my takeaway from it is a real crystallization of why America could never win this war. And Kurtz, as a character, understands so fully the difference between an occupier and a resistance fighter. You know, he talks about how in this monologue with he says that he with the special forces he went and vaccinated
the inoculated arms thing.
he inoculated a village, and when they came back to the village, the militants, the resistance, however you want to put it, had hacked off all the limbs of the people who had received this
Children specifically.
children, yeah, and who had received the American aid. And Kurtz comes to the conclusion that this is a stroke of genius on their part, that this act of intense moral decision making, that not because the inoculation is bad, but because of the opposition to anything that America does, the Vietnamese or whoever, it's not stated, I think we can assume it's probably Vietnamese, are so dedicated to their cause that they will cause this terrible atrocity against their own people. And then at the end, he goes on to say that the Americans do not have this heart, this drive, this desire for war making, the desire to fight for what they see as righteous. And that if he had 10 battalions of the men like that who chopped off the arms, if he had those men, all the problems in this war would be solved because he would have true fighters. And I think that this displays an understanding of the mental state of an occupying army versus one that's fighting back and trying to preserve the land that is theirs or that they believe is theirs. And that extraordinary ability of a resistance group to keep going and to do what they deem is necessary, no matter how terrible it looks or is, that I think this speech here that Kurtz understands the necessity of war and the grossness, the horror, as he likes to repeat, the very famous lines that we end the film on.
Mhm.
That horror and moral terror are your friends. If they are not, and if not, then they are enemies to be feared. That this horrible acts have a place in war, and this is well, I'm rambling a little bit, but I find it very interesting, and this speech to be really incredibly performed, and the little improv line where Kurtz calls Willard, you're not a soldier, you are an errand boy for grocery clerks. This line,
To collect a bill.
sent to collect a bill. Talk about Kurtz taking the language of the military apparatus and just twisting it to show what really is going on. That, yeah, Willard might be a killer, but really, he's just on an assignment. He's just going to do the bidding of somebody else to fill some checkbox because of the slight that Kurtz caused by defecting and running away and starting his own dealio.
His own
His dealio. You know what? That's exactly the word that came to mind when I saw all that happening.
What's his dealio going on here?
I'm curious to throw it back to you because obviously you had invoked noir earlier, and the framing of Kurtz I think is so interesting. The performance of Kurtz is so interesting.
I'll let you. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll jump in afterwards.
I'm just curious what you make of how Marlon Brando plays that character and sort of how he feels to watch.
For me, this was the hardest part of the movie to pay attention to, because on a concept level, the movie's been building up to this point. Obviously, as a film history nerd, I know what we're building up to is Marlon Brando in the dark with all his cronies and all that stuff. And I like it on a conceptual level, and I think it is an interesting place for it to end. We have been building up this character across the course of the whole movie. But to me, on a very subjective, personal level, Kurtz's connection to poetry and the way that he shares his speeches and frames his dialogue is very much around poetry and metaphors and similes and stuff. And maybe it's that my brain is wired differently, but much like I simply cannot engage my brain to appreciate Shakespeare or poetry, this is one of those sequences to me. Timo's reading off these lines. I'm like, I don't remember that happening. I don't remember him saying that because it was so difficult for me to understand what he was saying. And I know this is one of the iconic film performances of all time, but again, much like the performance of Willard, the performance of Kurtz, I find to be hammy and like again, almost parodic of like, I can't take this guy seriously. I don't feel intimidated by him. I don't feel really any weight because to my mind, he's just spouting off a cyclical nonsense. And I know it's like half intended to be like, ridiculous and like a word soup, but I only felt the word soup element, and I only felt him being kind of like corny, and only seeing half his face, I guess, is at least a unique way to frame a character for the majority of their appearance. But
you know why it's like that?
Yes, I can.
Because he was like drunk and fat and all that stuff.
Yes. There's a very humorous crossfade in Hearts of Darkness. Because to be noted, of course, because I don't think we brought it up here. The movie is an adaptation of an 1899 novel called Heart of Darkness, which is roughly, obviously not about the Vietnam War, but about a guy who is on a journey in a jungle environment to go meet a famed ivory hunter named Kurtz.
In the Belgian Congo. So this is African imperialism.
It's a very anti-colonialist book, very progressive for its time, and obviously has a lot of like racist stuff in it, being written in 1899. I digress. Anyway, they're reading a segment. There's a narration segment in the documentary, The Making of, about what Kurtz is supposed to look like. This sort of gaunt, almost skeletal kind of figure, on 1 foot in the grave kind of thing. And they have that. They have a little illustration of Kurtz, and then they crossfade to bald, fat Marlon Brando. Oh, well, like they say, oh, the gaunt skeletal figure of Kurtz, and you're like, and then it goes to Francis Ford Coppola talking about, so I knew that Brando was big when he signed on for the film, but I was told that he would slim down a little, but I did not expect him to look like that when he arrived. Mind you, this is on around day 200 of filming. So
because they
then,
spent like 2 months shooting the attack on the beach scene. They spent like 2 months shooting the Do Long Bridge sequence.
Yes.
They spent huge amounts of time on all of these sequences.
Yes. And then, of course, Brando shows up and clearly has not read the original novel, does not know his lines, as late era Marlon Brando is off to do. And so, yes, they have to obscure him, hide him in darkness a lot of the time, so he's not like a big fat guy. Because Coppola also thought like, oh, maybe I could like fold in the gluttony of this character, sort of reframe him a little bit. Maybe he is, sort of gorging himself on mangoes and food, and he has a harem of tribal girls around him. And Marlon Brando's like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. No, I want to do something else. So yeah, they had to sort of construct this character on the fly in like this last month-ish of shooting this final sequence when Francis Ford Coppola is at his wit's end, when he is like actually contemplating killing himself because he's convinced that he's made the worst movie, the biggest mess of all time.
Wouldn't even be his biggest mess.
Yeah, your biggest. What's that Simpsons meme?
Worked on the longest.
The Simpsons meme was like, "This is the worst ever. This is the worst day yet to come."
Exactly.
I think for me, when it comes to the depiction of Kurtz, there is a crumb on the corner of his mouth when he's eating that I think is I can't get out of my mind whenever I see the film. It's because we're sort of passing over his face in waves. Again, this is where this idea of me feeling like I'm in and out of consciousness while watching comes from, because I'm hearing his ideology, and total darkness is passing through the film, and we just catch slivers of his face, and there's just this gross crumb in the corner of his mouth. And I think that there's something very interesting about that, because he is, I agree with you, Tucker. He's not that imposing in a physical sense. And obviously you guys are explaining why, but I think that to me, that's part of, again, what makes the character of this film so memorable, is that he is this guy. He's just a guy. He's an American guy. He's a little bit fat. That's a lot of American guys.
He is you're almost inclined to think like, oh, in this final confrontation, two special ops Green Beret guys going head to head.
Like, it's Metal Gear Solid.
It's like, it's Metal Gear Solid. But no, he's like an old, out of shape guy who's been living in the jungle for years, probably. So he's like, doesn't put up much of a fight. He's not like I also think this is my interpretation of Kurtz, because I think there is perhaps a misread of him, generally in the culture of like, oh, Marlon Brando playing like the ultimate soldier, going out into the jungle, making his own platoon, his battalion of rugged jungle warriors, like doing the things that the American government won't. I was like, that's not exactly my read. My read of Kurtz, of Marlon Brando's portrayal of him, is like a guy who is severely depressed, who is at completely spun out in terms of thinking about like, why do we do the violence that we do? Like, if we are going to do it, why do we not fully commit to it like our enemies? Why do we not embrace the fear, the horror, the atrocity? Why do we try to shunt all that stuff away? And he's not a guy who is like, I am the fucking darkness, I am the ultimate warrior. He's like, I am so burdened with the ideas of everything that I have done and the ceaseless, meaningless violence enacted on these people that, in a way, I am ready to die. I am ready to be sacrificed at the altar. And of course, when we see his death, he is being cross-cut with this sacrificial cow at the end. That is my read on him, is that he is a guy who he is fighting because that's the only thing he knows, but also he has made peace with his fate of death.
It's a interesting, again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the film, this sort of odd prescience of this film in many ways right now, and this idea that he's challenging of like the way that America's soft power as an empire, even in direct conflict, has been the sort of tenor with which America operates on the global stage. And as we've seen from examples like Trump speaking to Zelensky, the way in which the US is flexing its power differently, flexing its power in a more bald-faced way, in a Kurt's bald-headed style way.
Wow, very good.
It's interesting because the film is not because I kind of forgotten what his ideology was watching this time. And I was trying to remember, is it because he ends up being a sympathetic communist figure? That's not what Kurtz is.
Not at all.
Kurtz is something different. Kurtz is something very strange. Kurtz is what these other men perhaps wish that America could be. He is the logical conclusion of American imperialism. And that's scary to the men like Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is why he must be, what is the terminology one more time, Abram? He must be...
His leadership must be terminated with extreme prejudice.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
No, yeah, the colonialism stuff is also something that, so as aforementioned, we watched the original 2.5 hour theatrical cut of this film. Though in the Hearts of Darkness documentary, they do include some scenes that are included in the Redux version, which include this scene on a French plantation, sort of a holdover from like the mid 20th century, from the 1950s, when the French, Vietnam was heavily under French colonial control. And there's a sequence in there. There's a line specifically from those cutscenes that stuck with me, all about the American war effort in Vietnam and what we were fighting for, and colonialism and American exceptionalism and imperialism and everything. It is the patriarch of this colonial sort of house, sort of stuck in time, says, "This is our land. If they kick us out of this house, then we'll live in a ditch, and if they kick us out of the ditch, then we'll live in the jungle." He's like, that is what we were That's what we are fighting for. That they have a claim to this land, or so they believe. And he says, Americans are here fighting for the biggest nothing that ever was. And that is like the period end of sentence for what the war in Vietnam was about. It was a chess piece in the broader Cold War capitalism versus communism ideology battle. At the end of the day, it was not for land, it was not for resources, it was not for anything. It's the biggest nothing in modern American history.
If you, dear viewer, are interested in learning more about the Vietnam War and the events that led up to it, and kind of the lesser told side of it, the Blowback podcast has a season on Vietnam, and it is incredibly well done. The Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, just to bring in a little real life lore here. It was a fabricated false flag attack on Americans. It didn't happen. The Vietnamese did not attack the Americans, and the Americans claimed that they did, and we went to war over it. And so, yes, they didn't know that when they made Apocalypse Now, but they got the idea. They understood that that's what the reality on the ground was, and the reality back at home was too. You know who made money off it? Defense contractors. The military-industrial complex made a lot of money in Vietnam, and one could argue that that's big primary motivator for why we were involved in it,
Collection of anecdotes that fit into conversation, or fit into sequences we were talking about, or sort of skipped over, but I just didn't have time to fit in. The Do Long Bridge sequence, can't help but notice that, as I kind of mentioned, my read of it is like the last bastion, like the true edge of the war effort. Like, there is no R&R for these guys. There is no respite for them. Can't help but notice basically all black soldiers in that sequence.
Yeah.
There's like one white guy who is the guy that's like, the thing that you're looking for is, we call it Beverly Hills or whatever. But otherwise, like the guys in the bunker and Roach and everything like that, all black soldiers. So very clear sort of reading of the racial tensions in America at that point being translated over to the war effort there. The The Playboy sequence we didn't talk about specifically, as we kind of mentioned, well, sort of wrapped up in the R&R Americans bringing America to the war effort thing. I do like the guy in it, like the Playboy agent or whatever.
Oh yeah.
He comes out of the helicopter and does like the Nixon peace fingers. Love that. Incredible stuff.
And like, doesn't he do that as they're like airlifting the models out of there too?
It might be one they're leaving. He does like the Nixon peace fingers and then gets on the helicopter, which is so good.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I have it? I mean, I kind of went over them before. I'll throw in the tidbit about the sound development here. When Walter Murch was originating this movie before 1979, pretty much all sound mixing was done to a stereo output. So you got 2 channels, but Walter Murch needed more for this. And so he developed at the time what he called the quintaphonic reproduction system. Of course, that would be 5 channels. And nowadays we know that as 5.1. It's incredibly ubiquitous. He worked with Dolby to make it the standard. Every movie theater that you go to has at least 5.1, if not 7.1 or Atmos, which are just natural evolutions of this technology that were specifically developed to be used on this film. And to be used with the helicopter sound, I think, which is the key sound signature of this film that we use time and time again, and that Murch very consciously placed in 3D space. Stereo is 2D, it's coming out of the screen, you hear left and right, but with the quintaphonic reproduction, he was able to pan that around so it would seem like it go behind you and to the side of you and all around. And this is a very common experience for us modern theater goers. This is just how they're done now, but this is big time advancements for Apocalypse Now. And even listening here at home, and I don't have 5.1, I've got a nice stereo setup. Still just wonderful movement in the soundscapes flowing around, and it's really coming from these thumbing, drumming helicopter blades that are just ever present in the film. And that comes from Murch's research into what the soundscapes of the war were really like through interviews and stuff with veterans who described all kinds of stuff. They talk about how this film, if you didn't know, did not receive official U.S. military support.
It did not.
They filmed it in
the Philippines using actual military equipment from the Philippine government or Filipino government rather, and especially in the Kilgore sequences, the documentary has great moments where the government's like, oh hey, actually we're fighting rebels like in our country, so we're gonna need
communist
like 5
rebels.
of those we're gonna need like 5 of those helicopters you're using. And Francis Ford Coppola's like, what the I'm filming. You can't just take these helicopters. It's like, I guess they're taking the goddamn helicopters.
They would take the helicopters back. The Filipino army would repaint them. They would go kill some communists down in the south. They would give them back to the film crew, who would then repaint them again back into American livery, and then it would be like a daily day and nighttime occurrence. Just crazy.
Crazy shit. One final thing I want to say, and Timo, I think you said something to the effect of like, the film being sort of trying to capture the feeling of Vietnam in his sort of post Palme d'Or winning press conference. Francis Ford Coppola said something along the lines of like, the film is not about Vietnam, it is Vietnam, which is of course like a super directory sort of pompous thing to say, but he's like, I think he then supplements it with some very interesting like self-awareness, where he's like, we went in with way too much equipment, with way too much money, a bunch of dumb Americans stumbling into the jungle thinking that we could accomplish something, and got ourselves into a whole crock of shit that we did not anticipate. I think that's really fascinating, and of course lends itself to the hellish production of this, which makes it again all the more impressive, the product that was made after years and years of production, and then like having to go through 1.5, was it how much it was like 250 hours of footage or something like that. I forget how much like the actual length of the reels, but it's
many
truly incredible feat, truly an incredible feat of filmmaking. To have it come out this fucking good, it's crazy.
Before we palm the tail, before we score, Tucker, is there anything you think that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
No, I mean, look again. I couldn't contribute to almost any of this. Like I didn't. It's an interesting balance of where I feel I'm not as impressed by the way that this, I'm on like a researcher level impressed by the fact that this shit actually got made.
Yes.
Sure.
And that it succeeded. But on a subjective level, I think, and maybe because this movie was so influential for the other war movies that followed it, a lot of this movie, especially on a scene level, I felt very okay. I get it. I know where this is going. I've seen this kind of character before. I know what's going to happen here, and I really was unable to escape that. And it made it very difficult for me to engage with the movie on a deeper level, which is not necessarily a critique of the movie's content, but of course my mindset. Um, so I when I said I couldn't really contribute to a lot of this, it was that I understood the broad strokes of what you guys were saying, but I was not engaged enough by this movie. I think particularly because I felt it was very slow and for me very repetitive. Like a lot of these sequences felt very samey to me. Of course, the locations are largely same. There are a couple sets and sequences that really stuck out to me, but I like what you said about dipping in and out of consciousness. But the reality was, it was not a joke. I literally was.
I woke him up. I woke him up.
I was just like, oh my god. And whenever and I'm just gonna share my experience now because
Here we go.
we're done. You guys know I don't like this movie. It's that much. It's not a surprise. I would wake up and something similar was happening, and I would just slow exhale through my nose, like, yep. I'm gonna have to do
So
this on
annoying to
Quest
listen
tomorrow.
to. So annoying.
Timo, I swear to fucking God, I was not doing it on purpose. I wasn't trying to annoy you.
I know you're not
This
trying.
movie
I know you were not trying.
frustrated me. It frustrated me because I know it's a movie that I should love. I know it's a movie that everyone else loves. And watching it, I felt fucking nothing. And I don't know why. I was watching this, it was just happening and happening. I'm like, I get it. Okay, the performance is, it's fine. All right, that's impressive on a technical level, but like, I don't know, the script and the characters like is not engaging me at all. And it was just a downward spiral of a movie that I have absolutely zero connection to. And that is the worst feeling to feel, especially as a reviewer. But I can't really offer any particular praise or criticism of this movie. I'm like, yeah, I know it's impressive to other people, but I can't.
Well, it sounds like you can't give any criticism. It's perfect. That sounds like we're getting a Tucker 10.
Perfect. It sounds like a perfect movie to me. Maybe you just need to watch the 3 hour and 15-minute Redux cut, or
that would certainly help,
or the assembly cut, which I presume is even longer, but I'm not sure you can find that one, or the final cut, which I think is 3 hours long. There's a lot of
not as long as the Redux. He cut out some more stuff. He it's a medium between the
final cut is like the Redux.
I think I have that on Blu-ray, but it's a region-locked Blu-ray that I bought in the UK, and I can't watch it. So,
well, there you go. Well, all right.
I'll never know what's on there.
Sounds like you need to get a region-free Blu-ray player, my man.
I also have the Infernal Affairs trilogy on region-locked Blu-ray, so I need to sort this out.
Tanner, would you hit us with the palm details?
Oh yes, of course, Timo. Oh, the French champagne. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So in 1979, by the way, Apocalypse Now did split the Palme d'Or with a film that we've already reviewed. Anyone want to take a stab? 1979 movie. Anyone pull it?
Oh, I can't remember.
The Tin Drum. The Tin Drum was the other winner from this year.
I hope this gets 16,000 views.
Well, Tucker, I think there is no lack of Apocalypse.
16,000 people will be pissed off at me and not want to watch more.
Did we get 16,000 views on the Tin Drum review?
It's our most viewed video.
It's crazy. It's insanity.
What?
It's utter insanity. I think there was probably more reviews and analysis of Apocalypse Now on the internet than there is for the Tin Drum. I'm just gonna put that out there. I haven't pulled the exact numbers. Anyway, the jury president this year was Françoise Sagan, who we all know and love. Of course, we love her work.
That's where he's at at the beginning.
Very good.
I did pay attention.
That's good. Saigon, shit, Other jury
Classic.
members were Sergio Amietti from Italy and Jules Dassin from the United States. Again, yeah, I tried to pull some names. Jules Dassin is the director of Rafifi. It's a notable film that guy made. But other notable films of the 21 in competition this year. Again, like I said, 2 split the Palme d'Or. Others that did not win the top prize were The China Syndrome from James Bridges, Days of Heaven by Terrence Malick,
That's a
Norma
good
Ray
one.
by Martin Ritt, and Wojciech by Werner Herzog.
Okay.
Front of the show.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Werner Herzog.
Well, let's give this a score, shall we?
Let's do it.
Maybe we shall.
I'm gonna punch my number in. I knew what it
Punching
was.
mine
I
in.
knew what my number was before we started this review. Let me just
Fair.
put it that
abstain?
way.
Is that allowed? Can I abstain? Do we all get one abstain on?
Oh, we all
Quest?
got to vote.
You gotta
Yeah,
vote.
I mean, there's a couple Quest movies on the Best Picture ranking that don't have a number from one or
All
one
four
or
of them.
less.
That's a good point.
Mhm. But you did
Anyway,
watch
I
it,
think they're
so
all Abram actually.
No,
Um,
I wasn't on the last Emperor review,
a good point.
unfortunately. The one I
unfortunately,
missed. So sad.
the one that got away.
I'll
All
put
right.
it this way, Tucker. I think if you abstain, this is going to go very, 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 very high on the list.
Yes, yes, that's true. So
Let's
your
find out.
input will count. Probably.
will
I don't
count.
I mean, I don't know. I
Punch a number in.
I've never had a. I mean,
Punch a number in.
like, do I reflect the movie as it is or as I watched it?
I don't know. You need more time to deliberate. I can talk more about Apocalypse Now, about the fucking shit, the crazy shit that went down on the set of this
Everyone's
movie.
so
What about
sweaty
the
in
time when
movie.
I was remarking upon how
That's a
goddamn
good point.
sweaty.
The sweatiness
and
is something I noticed.
It's like modern movies are so afraid of being in the conditions like that. They got the little glycerin bottle of sweat spray that they,
Mhm.
this is how you do sweat
People
nowadays.
are
You
not
add it.
having heart attacks on the set of films anymore. Martin Sheen had a fucking heart attack on this movie, and Francis Ford Coppola was like, I don't know, just put him in a fucking Filipino hospital. We'll wait 4 weeks for him to get back. We're just gonna keep shooting the movie.
We'll find.
Like,
We'll figure out some other stuff to go shoot.
exactly. He's like, unless I hear Martin Sheen is dead, I am not shutting down this production.
He didn't even have a heart attack walking across Spain in Emilio Estevez's The Way, which I watched before Apocalypse Now earlier this week.
So true, Abrams. So true.
We need more
They fucking-
hurricanes
Harvey
destroying
Keitel was
the
supposed to be in
sets.
this movie. Harvey Keitel was supposed to play Willard. They replaced him after like a week of shooting. They got done with the first week of shooting. He sat down in the editing room. Eleanor Coppola talks about this. They started editing. She put the kids to bed. She came back. They were having a conversation. They're getting rid of Harvey Keitel, the main character of the entire movie, the main actor. They're cutting him. They're sending him home. They're shipping in Martin Sheen.
Wow.
Oh god.
Oh my god.
238 days of production. There was a very funny shot where like the government or the crew or something set up like a crazy like fireworks billboard that's like 200 days of filming for Apocalypse Now. Congratulations, Francis. And it cuts back to him, and he's fucking like, I got fucking 200 days. I gotta fucking put this movie together. I'm gonna kill myself. He's like, I might just throw myself off a set. I might paralyze myself. At least it'll be a graceful way out. I don't know.
And yet, I totally understand how he went from making this to making Megalopolis. I think the through line exists 100%. It's so obvious that the same guy made both of these movies. Tucker, did you
Lord.
figure out a score?
I put him on.
Okay.
You got it? You got it?
3,
All right.
2, 1.
I decided to be generous.
Tucker decided to be generous. He gave it a 5.3, but the rest of us gave it a flat 10. So the average is 8.8. That is
Good
That
time.
still puts it incredibly high.
Yeah.
8.8 is going to rocket right above the road, right below The Pianist at spot number 8 on the list. 888. That's pretty good for one of the movies of all time.
I would tend to agree.
So that's that. What's that? 8.8 puts that at spot 8.
Yes.
Yes.
Whoa. Well, that's rather poetic when you really think about it.
When you really
that
think
out
about it.
over the loudspeaker he has set up.
Yeah,
Where do you get
I'll
that
probably shoot myself in the
loudspeaker
head.
from? Probably a helicopter.
Yeah,
It's
a helicopter.
He had a
If I-
typewriter. He had all kinds of stuff in there.
Yeah, a radio.
It's true. It's true.
BBR Street Gang. This is the Rubber Duck. Oh wait, that's a convoy. Never mind. We get to do it. We get to spin the wheel.
Alrighty. Fine. Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, okay. Alrighty.
Is it
because
63 or is it 62?
Let's check. That's a great
We
question,
should
Timo.
check. We should check.
Let me
'Cause I
check.
don't know. It's been a little while.
It is
The
63.
ultimate point is it doesn't really matter.
That's a fair point.
It doesn't.
But I will.
There's literally one of the numbers that would be a problem.
I will have a little bit of wheel controlling next time, I think. But this time we can still throw it to the random gods of chance.
Yes. Yes.
I
we
thought it
will.
was this time.
Don't think so. I think we're recording one more before
Okay.
before that. But
Whatever.
we'll see. Timo, please. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
And the number
Okay.
is 62.
Oh shit.
Oh. We're going quite modern with this one then. We are going to the winner from the year 2021, sorry.
2021.
What did you just say?
I think I said 2020, which is not a year that we're in yet. 2021's winner
That'll be a while from now.
was, of course, a French film starring some folks that some you may have heard of, Laurence Mallier, Agatha Roussel, and the one you may have heard of, Vincent Lindon, from director Julia Ducournau. This is Titan.
Oh my God! This fucking movie.
I've never seen it.
It's gonna be really
Never
interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
Abram, I just wish I had a little reaction camera for your face for this entire film.
This is the substance all over again.
This is
baby.
the substance, but
Oh, is it
far.
really?
Yeah. In a way, it's a body. It's definitely a body horror movie. It's got some pretty gnarly kills.
I know she
Some
fucks a car. That's all I
surreal-
know about the movie.
That is true.
That's-
that does happen
yeah.
in the film.
That happens, and there might
Oh,
there
shit,
might or might
deers.
not be consequences for that.
There are some consequences to this.
Oh my God! Well, we're gonna have fun watching Titan. We've we did Apocalypse Now, and now we'll go watch another crazy, freaky movie. Thank you guys, thank you all for bringing very much discussion to this talk about Apocalypse Now, and I can't wait for this next one. I'm gonna put off watching it as long as I can, but I will watch it. So
You know what, Timo? Thank
Good.
you.
Good.
good.
If I had to watch Apocalypse Now, you have to watch Titan.
Yes, yes.
No,
It's only fair.
Have we all, except Abram, seen this before?
Mhm.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah. I saw it in the theater when it came out that year. It was
Same
Yeah, me too.
it was an interesting time. I'll put it that way.
It was
Back in the day,
back in the day,
back in the good old
2021.
days, before cinema went to shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let us
Yeah,
let
got
us know what we got right and what we got wrong about Apocalypse Now. Put your favorite tidbit about the production history of it down in the comments, and stick around for Titan next week. I got nothing else. Stay cool. Keep warm. Peace.
Should have thrown up two. There we go. Thank you.